So this is Tuesday night, December 26th, and this is yet another meeting of the Jijang Bosal book club. We're continuing to discuss Jiru Ing's book, The Making of a Savior Bodhisattva. And tonight we're moving on to a new chapter on art and epigraphy, which we'll get to in just a moment. But before jumping into art and epigraphy, we're going to chant the Jijang Bosal chant together.
Jijang Bosal, 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 Jijang Bosal. Yorok jam jam ni Om Paramani Dani Sabaha Om Paramani Dani Sabaha Om Paramani Dani Sabaha Om Shuntrujino no Mamoka Salvadara Sadaya Shive Om Om Mamoka Salvadara Sadaya Shive Om Om Mamoka Salvadara Sadaya Shive Om Sandarani Nam Samanda Motanam Abaraji Harasa Sananam Danyata Om Kaka Kae Kae Hum Hum Avara 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 Chitta Chitta Chiri Chiri Pada Pada Sanjiga Shiriye Sabaha Namu Samanda Motanam Abaraji Harasa Sananam Danyata Om Kaka Kae Kae Hum Hum Abara 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 Chitta Chitta Chiri Chiri Pada Pada Sanjiga Shiriye Sabaha Namu Samanda Motanam Abaraji Hadasa Sadanam Danyata Om Kaka Kae Kae Hum Hum Abara 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 Chitta Chitta Chiri Chiri Pada Pada Sanjiga Shiriye Sabaha Boho Jino Om Horo Horo Saya Roke Sabaha Om Horo Horo Saya Roke Sabaha Om Horo Horo Saya Roke Sabaha Boho Nyang Jino Om Samara Samara Mimara Charma Jagora Barahum Om Samara Samara Mimara Charma Jagora Barahum Om Samara Samara Mimara Charma Jagora Barahum Chakshil Shimyonga Suji Dehe Jungsuha Hunjin Ogongaryang Bungaye Monong Jinsol Pul
Okay, so now we will jump into where is it? Chapter 4 of Jiro Ing's book, entitled Art and Epigraphy. I'm going to share my screen and just show for those who are following along their own book. This is a chapter that we're working on now. Art and epigraphy as opposed to either scriptural sources that is canonical or semi-canonical scriptural sources. That's what we had been talking about in the previous chapter, and in the next chapter we're going to talk about basically stories, narrative literature. People, in particular, people collected miracle stories about Dizang, and or just records that people have of tales of people who are devotees of Dizang. So this chapter is about. It does involve some written sources. Epigraphy means stuff that's written down, but it's mostly in like captions or notations. Not long prose works or even short prose works. But most of what we're going to talk about tonight is art. Okay, and this is a long chapter, so we'll actually continue the discussion of this chapter in the next class, which will be next year, the first Tuesday of 2024, or no, the second Tuesday of 2024, which will be the 9th, Tuesday, January 9th. We'll finish up this chapter and make a start on chapter 5. And we'll be nearing the end of the book by that point. Okay, so I have some slides here somewhere. And it's one of these. Here it is. It's this one with the big stupa on it. Okay, so now, okay, I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Jijang Bosal chant and some of the things that are in that are actually related to things we're going to be talking about in this chapter. But let me just dive right in here. This is a big picture of a stupa, and so in the beginning, Buddhists didn't make Buddhist statues, and it's pretty hard to even think about, at least for me, it's hard to even imagine people practicing Buddhism without there being an altar with the statue of the Buddha on it, or some Buddha or Bodhisattva. But originally, that wasn't necessarily the case, although there is, we don't know for sure, because it's always possible that statues were made from materials that were not particularly durable or permanent. And so, and it's quite likely that there were figures made. Some of the earliest statues that are found, Buddhist statues that are found, show that this wasn't the first rodeo for the people who made those statues. So there was, by the time Buddha statues appear, they were either copying other kinds of statues and just making them into Buddha statues, or there had already been the production of statues previously, statues that don't survive for one reason or another. Anyway, but what does survive, and what we do have lots of, are stupas, and stupas in theory go back to the days after the death of the historical Buddha. We don't have any stupas that can be reliably dated back that far, but there are stupas that go back at least to 200 BCE, which is within a couple of hundred years of when the Buddha died, the historical Buddha died. And this is I took this screen grab. I would recommend checking out this virtual tour, and it's a well narrated tour of a very nice exhibit. The exhibit is now over, but the virtual tour lives on. It's at the Met Museum, and it's called Tree and Serpent: Early Buddhist Art in India, and it focuses on stupas. And actually, they say in the course of this virtual tour, they say this, we could have called it stupas, but they thought tree and serpent, sounded more interesting, because there's lots of trees and lots of serpents. And one of the points that they make in titling it that is that there's lots of artwork, there's lots of ornamentation, there's lots of representations on these stupas, but there's no figures of the Buddha. And so two things that you see a lot of in these stupas are pictures of trees, because the tree was one of the earliest sacred symbols of Buddhism, because the Buddha was born under a tree. The Buddha attained enlightenment under a tree. The Buddha died while lying down between two trees. There's trees are all over the place, and the trees are very, very symbolic and important in Buddhism. When the next Buddha comes, he will attain enlightenment. When Maitreya comes, he will attain enlightenment under another tree. And so trees and serpents. There's lots of serpents, lots of snakes. Let's see. Okay, so one thing I like about the let's see if I can get zoom in a little bit on this. Yeah. So you can see here's a gateway. You walk in. So this is an enclosed path around the stupa. The stupa itself proper is this big domed enclosed area in here. And then there's this enclosed walkway that you can enter by one of four gateways, and the four gateways are aligned with the cardinal directions. And this is for circumambulating. You walk around the stupa on the outside. Now, inside the stupa are the relics of the Buddha. And so the tradition is that when the Buddha died, he was cremated, and then relics were collected from the cremation remains and were distributed in to eight stupas that were distributed around India. And then when King Ashoka came along a few hundred years later, he thought 8 stupas wasn't enough. The tradition is that he wanted to build 84,000 stupas. So he took the relics that were in those original 8 stupas and redistributed them more widely, including, as legend has it, a temple, a stupa in China that contained one of the finger bones of the Buddha. Okay. Let's see. Notice the stupa has a large central dome-shaped structure. Yeah. All right. Oh yeah. You can't really see it very well, but there are these things up here are parasols sitting on top of the stupa. That's a kind of a traditional thing to cover anything that is very sacred with an umbrella. Now, like I said, the earliest stupas were very ornately adorned with all kinds of artwork, just no pictures of the Buddha. Pretty much anything else, including, very notably, one of the things that isn't really emphasized, talked about in the exhibit at the Met, is another very prominent feature in many of the earliest stupas is figures of the goddess Lakshmi, and here we can zoom in on her. Okay, so this is Lakshmi, and you might say, how can you tell it's Lakshmi? And that's an excellent question. That's one of the things that we really need to talk about in this class tonight, and it's a kind of a basic issue in the reason why it's good to study art and epigraphy, because if you know that this is Lakshmi because of these elephants up here. These elephants up here, each elephant is holding a water basin, and they are lustrating. They are pouring water on Lakshmi. Now, there's actually some Buddhists and some Buddhist scholars don't like the idea that the earliest Buddhist stupas had all these images of Lakshmi all over them. And so they try to insist that this is actually Maya Devi. This is the Buddha's biological mother. And if it is Maya Devi, then it's Maya Devi looking and acting just like Lakshmi. Because if any Hindu or anybody who knows anything about Hinduism were to see this representation, they would just immediately know that that's Lakshmi. So this is from Sanchi, the Sanchi Stupa, which I don't know where that is in India, dated from the 1st century. Like I said, this figure is sometimes identified as Devi Maya or Maya Devi, the Buddha's biological mother. So already I'm getting into the subject of iconography, which will be kind of a big deal in this chapter. The iconography of Lakshmi is well known. The Gaja Lakshmi is Lakshmi with elephants. And if you see a female, some sort of a divine or a sacred female figure with an elephant on either side of her pouring water down on her, that's Lakshmi. Or someone who's looking and acting like Lakshmi. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, and this is from Miranda Shaw's wonderful book, Buddhist Goddesses of India. The Buddhist depictions of Lakshmi at Bharut and Sanchi are among the earliest known artistic images of the goddess Lakshmi. Her effigies appear on the stupa gateways and balustrades in a variety of iconographic forms. She may be seated with her legs crossed or one leg pendant. She may stand atop a lotus calyx in a frontal symmetrical stance, or this should be or a sensuous thrice flexed pose with outthrust hips. Okay, so all right. So now when Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are being visually represented, and so one of the things that is a running theme in Zhu Ying's book is that this text or this sculpture or this painting or what have you is the earliest, or an early example of a representation of the Bodhisattva Dizang. And so if it's a written source and it says Dizang, then you know it's Dizang. But if it's a statue or a painting or a drawing or a carving or what have you, how do you know if it's Dizang or not? And so it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, because if you say, well, Dizang has this and Dizang does this and Dizang looks like this, how do you know that? How do we know? And ideally, you have sculptures or paintings or drawings or whatever that come with some sort of a text saying this is Dizang. But it turns out that there are a lot of different possibilities when you encounter representations of bodhisattvas and Buddhas. Are they male or female? Are they lay or monastic? And this is one of the most important ones that Zhu Ying focuses on in this chapter. Are they seated or standing? If they are seated, what's their posture? Full lotus, 1 foot down, both feet down. The image of Lakshmi that we looked at was with 1 foot down, and that is a very, very typical pose for a bodhisattva. If they're sitting, what are they sitting on? Are they sitting on a lotus, an elephant, a tiger, a horse, a dragon? And we will encounter a very interesting creature that Dizang is often pictured sitting on, coming up in a slide soon. What are they wearing? So this is another thing. This is directly related to the question of whether or not the being that's being represented is a layperson or a monastic. And so if they're wearing so here's a nice picture of Guru Rinpoche, aka Padmasambhava, over here, and he's decked out pretty well. He's got so he's got his staff with you can see the little heads on his staff here. He's got a vajra. He's got I think this is a skull cup with a vase inside of it. He's wearing boots. He's got a halo. He's got a hat. And he's got colorful, luxurious, flowing robes and jewelry. And so, typically, monks wear very plain robes and no jewelry, and they have shaved heads. They don't wear hats. Now, one of the things that happens with Kshitigarbha is that Kshitigarbha is often portrayed as a monk, but he's got jewelry and he's wearing a crown. And so the portrayal of Kshitigarbha as a monk is one of the distinctive things about Kshitigarbha. So it's kind of interesting that even though he's portrayed as a monk, he still has some of the qualities of other bodhisattvas. So the other bodhisattvas are not usually just portrayed as lay people, but as often portrayed as royalty of some sort. Okay, what are they holding? Kshitigarbha is usually holding one or more things that are important. What color are they? Now, to my knowledge, there isn't any real consistent color association with Kshitigarbha, although I just today saw a website um, that said that Kshitigarbha was green. I haven't heard that before. Now, how many heads do they have? Turns out this is an important question for quite a few bodhisattvas, but especially for Avalokiteshvara. Um, uh, how many arms do they have? Again, Avalokiteshvara has many forms, and other bodhisattvas have forms where they have multiple arms. Um, what other beings are they portrayed alongside? This is another thing. So often bodhisattvas and Buddhas are not portrayed just by themselves. They are often very sociable. There's often groups of them. Oh, here's an example over here. Although, let me see, I'm pretty sure this is, this is probably, is this Long Chenpa? I don't know. This is probably, no, I'm not even going to try to guess. But it's very common for Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to be portrayed alongside other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas or other important beings. What are they doing with their hands? So very often, Buddhists and Bodhisattvas are portrayed with their hands in mudras, and of course, the most famous example of that is the earth touching mudra of Shakyamuni Buddha. What direction are they associated with? So some bodhisattvas have a particular direction, which you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell from a painting or a sculpture unless there was somehow that's indicated in the painting or sculpture or visual representation. But it isn't always the case, but it is the case for Kshitigarbha. So Amitabha is associated with the West very much. It's clear. Amitabha is the Buddha of the Western Pure Land. Akshobhya Buddha and Medicine Buddha are in the East, and that's also very clear. That's one of these things that is not a, oh, sometimes they're in the East, sometimes they might be somewhere else. No, they're always in the East. Ratnasambhava, I'm not sure how 100% how hard and fast it is, but Kshitigarbha is absolutely associated with the South. In fact, when we do the Jijang Bosal chant, that's part of the chant. He is the Southern Direction Transformation Lord. If we have time, I'll look at that. And Amoga City is in the north. That's the only one I could find that was consistently portrayed in the north. Although in the stupa that was on the first slide, Lakshmi was on the northern gate of that stupa. So like I said, the stupa has 4 gates that are lined up with the cardinal directions, and at least in that case, Lakshmi was on the northern gate of that particular stupa. Buddhas, so Bodhisattva, and I'm going to get into this pretty soon. Bodhisattvas are usually, they're portrayed or described even in writings. Well, that's another thing we'll talk about too. They're either visually portrayed or described as monks, or no, as lay people. Bodhisattvas are usually portrayed or described as princely or royal beings, not monastics. Kshitigarbha is the most notable and the most consistent exception to that. And sometimes people will go as far as to say that Kshitigarbha or Dizang is the only bodhisattva who's represented as a monk. That's not true, and we're going to see that later on as well. But it is true that other bodhisattvas are almost always represented as lay people, in particular as princes and princesses and kings and queens, royalty, and that Dizang Bodhisattva is usually represented as a monk. Now, Buddhas, the different Buddhas are often portrayed as monks, as monastics. And that's especially true of the 3, what I call the big 3. And these are by far the 3 most common Buddhas represented in Mahayana Buddhism, Shakyamuni Buddha, of course, Amitabha, and Medicine Buddha, and they're always portrayed as monastics. At least for Buddhas, when they're portrayed as monastic, this is often said that to be their Nirmanakaya form. Whereas the flowing robes and lavishly bejeweled representations of bodhisattvas is often said to be their Sambhogakaya form. Now, I'm not going to say anything else about that. Just that you might encounter that if you start digging into representations and iconography associated with different Buddhas and bodhisattvas. Okay. So here's 3 examples of 3 different Buddhas, all being represented as monks, as monastics, and they're making different hand gestures, mudras. Okay. So this is Vairocana making the Dharma Chakra mudra. This is the I think this is the mudra associated with the very first teaching that a Buddha gives upon attaining enlightenment. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it is the Dharma Chakra mudra. This mudra I do know. This is the Abhaya mudra. This is the dispelling fear mudra, and this is Amoga Siddhi, the one Buddha that I've been able to verify is consistently associated with the direction of the north. And this is Akshobhya Buddha as a monk, and this is Akshobhya. Akshobhya is the Buddha in the eastern direction, or one of the Buddhas in the eastern direction. And this must be Mara saying hello to Akshobhya, and he's making the Bhumi Spara mudra, which is the earth touching mudra. So that which would make sense. When Mara shows up like this, the thing to do is to make the earth touching mudra and call upon Prithvi. We're going to talk about Prithvi, the Vedic earth goddess. She'll show up a little later in this class. Let's see. Oh, now, so in addition to what bodhisattvas wear and what they're holding, so actually these are good representations. This is 2 different representations of Kshitigarbha. They both have the one leg down, and one of the reasons why the one leg down posture is associated with bodhisattvas is because this shows that they are ready to act. That they are there's different interpretations of the one leg down. It's often referred to as the one leg pendant, 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 pendant. But it indicates that they are not locked up in full lotus, that they have one leg down, that they are actually in the process of coming out of their meditative samadhi in order to help us. Okay, they both show Kshitigarbha holding the Chintamani jewel, holding the ring staff, wearing a crown, and wearing what presumably is supposed to be monastic robes. Also, where it's much clearer in this one, wearing earrings. So, like I said, even though this is considered to be a representation of Kshitigarbha as a monk, at least in this case, these are pretty nice robes, and these are pretty big earrings. Let's see, these earrings here, it's hard. Yeah, I guess there probably are earrings there as well. And also, and I include in the slides the links to where you can purchase these figures. These are available for purchase. I just grabbed these figures off of Amazon. But one thing that's interesting here, and then we're going to stop for a 5-minute break in just a second. These are both described in the description for these items for sale on Amazon as Kshitigarbha seated on a lion. But if you look at this lion, if you look here, you'll notice that this lion has hooves. And you can't see it really clearly, but if you could get up and look down on this lion's head, he's got a horn coming out of his head. So it's not actually a lion. I'm going to talk about the actual identity of this of the steed that Kshitigarbha rides after we come back from a 5-minute break, which we will do right about now. So I'm going to start the break now. Okay, so walking meditation is over. Any questions or interjections or anything at this point? What is this thing? Now, when and you might notice that everything I'm saying relates to, and a lot of it overlaps with what Zhu covers in this chapter. But I really wanted to provide, kind of like I did on Chinese history, I wanted to provide more kind of general background on how visual representations work in Buddhism. Because Chittagarbha is really an excellent subject to focus on, to kind of get an idea about how, because Chittagarbha is a very visually rich subject, and this is a good example of that right here. This funny thing that he is on, which is usually just described as a lion. In English, it's usually just described as a lion, because we don't have a word for this in English. Oops, that was the wrong. Yeah. All right.
Kurt, I wonder if there's some sort of mythological
There
beast
is.
that it might be.
There absolutely is, and we're gonna see what that is in just a second. If I can get my PowerPoint back under control here. I hit the wrong button, but
Also, too,
yeah.
just to throw this in,
Yeah.
that if you think of dogs that originated in China, such as the Shih Tzu, and maybe even the Chow, they were breeding those dogs to look like lions. And that's why, they sort of have the same classic look. But they had never really seen lions. African lions.
This thing that Chittagarbha is on is sometimes referred to as his dog, because Chittagarbha is also closely associated with a dog companion. One of the stories about, one of the many past life stories about Chittagarbha has this, in this one, I think it's a hymn. His mother dies and he prays for her, and she comes back, and she is rescued from a lower realm that she was reborn in, and she comes back as his dog, and then she's his trusty companion from then on. And so let me kind of get my
interesting.
It is, although this is obviously not a dog, but and all right. Let's see what I've got on the next slide. I don't know if I go right. And again, like I said, these are available for purchase. Oh yeah, this is Diting, or in Korean, Chaechong. And so here are a couple of better pictures. And I don't think, I'm pretty sure that Zhu does not talk about this at all. And this is not a criticism. It's just to show how rich the associations with Chittagarbha are. That you can write a whole book about him and leave out this thing that he's sitting on. And this is a Diting, and you can see here it's even clearer that he has hooves. And here's another one over here. This is not a one-off. This is a fairly standard thing. This is a horn. These are hooves. Oh yeah, and these ears are supposed to be dog's ears. So this is a composite animal. This is a, oh, let's see, one of these things. Okay, so this is from, oh yeah, and up here, this is a picture of one of these Diting things that looks more like a dog, a little freakish dog with claws and kind of a Chinese, tiger lion type face. This is from a blog post I found. Someone's talking about Diting. This is kind of the Mandarin pronunciation. The dog at Chidigarba's side. Diting is a dog similar to the divine beast which sits at the feet of Chidigarba. It is able to see through all the things in the world, including the hearts of humans, and is featured in the famous Journey to the West. Journey to the West is the story about Xuanzang and his journey to India, where he, among other things, found the Heart Sutra and brought back to China. In that story, it manages to see through the, I don't know the sub story here. Diting is said to have the best parts of several creatures: the head of a tiger, a horn, the ears of a dog, the body of a dragon, the tail of a lion, and the legs of a qilin. So a qilin is another mythical beast over here, which fortunately, if you know where to look, you can find the qilin has its own Wikipedia entry. And it has hooves. Down here you can see it has hooves. And the qilin is a legendary hooved chimerical creature that appears in Chinese mythology and is said to appear with the imminent arrival of or passing of a sage or illustrious ruler. Okay, so and here's just one other description. This is from the Wikipedia entry for Diting, a divine mythical creature and the steed of the Bodhisattva Kshitigarbha in Chinese Buddhism. One interpretation of its single horn is that it could receive information across the universe. It could also be used to attack and defend. Its hound ears were like a universal radio, transmitting the ability to distinguish good from bad to all believers. Okay, so oh yeah, it's interestingly, I just noticed this in this one. If you see Dizong's hand here, obviously his staff is missing. He's supposed to be holding a staff here. So I have a statue of Dizong that came with a staff, but the staff is like wrapped up separately, and when you get the statue out, you put the staff in there and set it up, and this one is missing the staff. Okay. All right, now this is just going over some, so if that's what Dizong rides, what do other bodhisattvas ride? So Samantabhadra rides an elephant. Manjushri, at least in this case, is riding a dragon. And so let's see, so you can kind of tell Samantabhadra is wearing a fancy thing on his head. To be honest, I wouldn't be able to look at this representation of Samantabhadra and say for certain that it's probably not a monk's robe. It's got too many colors in it, I guess. Okay. And this here, this is Manjushri here. So Manjushri has some fancy jewelry on, a thing on his head, and a sword, which you usually wouldn't associate with a monk, unless the monk was a Zen master who's about to kill a cat, right? Or cut a watermelon. Oh yeah, Kuan Yin often is also portrayed riding on a dragon. And this is the Peacock Wisdom Queen Bodhisattva, who is portrayed riding on a peacock. And I thought this was interesting just because I found a Korean language Wikipedia entry for the Peacock Wisdom Queen Bodhisattva, which you can click on this link to go look at that if you can read Korean. Yeah, so these are all different ways of oh, another thing that shows up is you see here. So here Kuan Yin has a bottle, and she's pouring it out. Let's see, anybody else here got a bottle? Nope. Okay. All right. So that's a common thing for Kuan Yin to have in her hands, but other bodhisattvas also often have the same type of bottle where they pour out the waters of compassion and mercy for sentient beings. Okay, here are bodhisattvas with more than one head and or more than two arms. The 11-headed Avalokiteshvara, which is a very important form of Avalokiteshvara, the 1,000-armed Kuan Yin, which is also extremely important form of Avalokiteshvara. And this is a Jijang Bosal. Jijang Bosal usually has 18 arms, and it took me a while to find all 18 of them. 2 of them are in the Mahamudra down here. So I kept coming up with 16, saying, I know she's supposed to have 18, where are they? And I finally realized, so 2 are in whatever this mudra is here. I don't know what that is. And then the Mahamudra down here. And all of the other hands are holding one of the implements that she's known for. These are the different things that she uses to help people with, right? And so, oh yeah, and another thing that is very often portrayed is that in addition to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas being portrayed alongside or with other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, there's very often, and it's often Amitabha, but there's often a Buddha or a Bodhisattva portrayed above the main representation. And in this case, it is Amitabha. Oh, and one of the reasons that you can kind of assume that it's Amitabha, if I could zoom in even more on that, it might not be, but it's red. And so often Amitabha is portrayed as red. And if it's red, and if Amitabha was holding a bright, dark cobalt blue bowl in his lap, then it would certainly be Amitabha. But it's not a blue bowl. And often in Chinese Buddhism, Amitabha is portrayed as golden, not as red.
Actually, Kurt,
yeah.
A little bit of my own research, it actually is. Because I was looking at statues of Kuan Yin, and actually the one you just switched to on the far right, if you look up into the headdress that she's wearing, that is the same image that's in there as well, right? And oftentimes it's almost like it's a crown or a tiara with Amitabha seated in the middle.
Yeah, with this Amitabha up here. So yeah, yes. Right. Okay. Well, there you go then. Okay. And then, so in addition to being seated on various animals, there's at least one bodhisattva, Marichi, I think is her name, who rides on a big pig, or boar, a sacred boar maybe is a more correct way of referring to it. But often they're just portrayed seated on lotus thrones. So here's 3 different. Here's Manjushri, Bodhisattva Manjushri. This version of Manjushri has at least 6 arms, one of which holding the sword that it's associated with Manjushri. This is Amitayus, the Buddha Amitayus, the Buddha of long life or infinite life, and I believe this isn't just a normal. This is the long life vase, holding, and this is Kuan Yin also holding a vase. This is not. I don't think this is considered to be the same long life vase as the one that Amitayus has. But so these are good examples. They're all seated in full lotus posture in this particular case. They're all seated on lotus thrones. This one has 6 arms. The other ones all have just the regular 2 arms. They've all got something on their heads. None of them look particularly monastic. Oh yeah, and here, so yeah, and in this particular instance, so that is almost certainly Amitabha inside the 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 head thing that Kuan Yin is wearing. Oh yeah, and so this, and so another thing that is often associated with bodhisattvas is color. So this is probably white-robed Kuan Yin, and that is I I don't know if Jiru makes references to white-robed Kuan Yin, but white-robed Kuan Yin plays a big role in uh, Chung Fan Yu's book, Avalokiteshvara, the Chinese transformation, or Kuan Yin, the Chinese transformation of Avalokiteshvara, which I'm going to refer to in a minute or two. Okay, yeah, here I am. I'm to it now. So one of the things that Zhuring wants to and does a good job of is talking about this thing that is kind of distinctive about um, uh, Chidigarbha is Chidigarbha being portrayed as a monk. Now, if you're not familiar with anybody who isn't too familiar with Mahayana Buddhism, it might be kind of surprising to find out why aren't bodhisattvas monks? And I think that's a good question. Why aren't bodhisattvas monks and nuns? And the answer is sometimes they are, but usually they're not. So why is that? And one of the reasons for that is because just as bodhisattvas are often portrayed in this posture where they have one foot down, the one leg pendant, is that the idea is to portray bodhisattvas as very active and engaged in the world. There is, regardless of what ideas one might have about engaged Buddhism, there is a certain aspect of withdrawal from the world that's involved in becoming a monastic. And bodhisattvas are generally portrayed as being very much engaged in the world. But so Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism at least, has always had engaged Buddhism. Bodhisattvas have always been portrayed as beings who are actively engaged in the world. And that has always been done in a way that is consciously distinguished from the monastic avocation. And so here, in this case, though, as a counterpoint to the discussion in Jiru's book and also in many other places, if you go looking for information, you'll even find some people who will say that Chidigarbha is the only bodhisattva who's ever portrayed as a monastic, and that's not true. And so this is why I have this one slide. This is from Chen Fang Yu's book, Kuan Yin, the Chinese transformation of Avalokiteshvara. This is a story about a guy who was sick, and he prayed to he chanted the Quan Yin Sutra. So this probably means the 25th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. That's usually what is being referred to, but I'm gonna say that's almost certainly what he's doing here. And then one day he suddenly saw a monk holding a water bottle, the one of the distinctive things that Kuan Yin is often portrayed as holding in front of him. And so the sick person who is chanting the Quan Yin Sutra asked the monk, "Where are you from?" And the monk answered, "Because you constantly call me, that is why I have come." And then the man bowed down and asked, "What evil karma did your disciple accumulate from previous lives that I should suffer this paralysis?" So he was paralyzed in both his feet. And the monk answered, "Because in your past life you captured and bound living beings, that is why you are now reaping these evil consequences. Close your eyes and I shall cure you." And he did as instructed, and he felt a nail of 6 or 7 inches being pulled from each of his knees. By the time he opened his eyes to thank the monk, he was gone. Just like the Lone Ranger. I like the idea of the Lone Ranger as a bodhisattva. Anyway, he got up and could walk normally as before. He then realized that the monk was Kuan Yin, and he vowed never to get married. Okay, which is in a way that kind of makes sense, since he was visited by Kuan Yin in the form of a monk. So he's now wants to emulate Kuan Yin, I guess. But the important part about this story is that it's explicitly it states that Kuan Yin appeared to this fellow in the form of a monk. That's one story. In the pre-10th century miracle stories examined here, when Kuan Yin appeared in person in the devotee's dream. So this is here is Chen Fan Yu telling a story that she has translated into English from a Chinese source, and here she is talking about. She tells many of these miracle stories associated with Kuan Yin. And consistently, when Kuan Yin appears in devotees' dreams, he appeared either as a monk, a person wearing white, a person about 8 feet tall, or a person bearing a close resemblance to an image. None was feminine. Okay. However, when we examine the miracle tales in later collections, we find a striking new change. Although the Bodhisattva continued to appear in the forms just mentioned, Kuan Yin increasingly also appears as a woman. Starting in the 10th century, we begin to read tales in which Kuan Yin appeared as a woman in white, then a woman carrying a fish basket, and finally in the Qing dynasty, increasingly as an old woman. These forms correspond to the white-robed Kuan Yin, the fish basket Kuan Yin, and the old mother Kuan Yin. Okay, all right, but so this is another very interesting thing, is that one of the things that Zhu Ying talks about in this chapter is that originally, there was actually Kshitigarbha wasn't always represented unambiguously as a monastic, just as originally Kuan Yin was never represented as a woman, but it changed over time, and over time, Kshitigarbha became consistently represented as a monk, and Kuan Yin became consistently represented as a woman. And so people normally assume that about both of them now, people who know a little bit about Bodhisattva iconography and representations. Just one last quote from Chen Fan Yu. When Kuan Yin appeared in the dreams and visions of devotees prior to and during the Tang, he most frequently took the guise of a monk. And so the way that bodhisattvas and Buddhas appear changes over time. It changes from one place to another. I wanted to do a slide on just the different ways that the Buddha looks, depending upon time period and part of Asia. It's quite interesting, but it's quite oh yeah, okay. Now let's see, what else do I have here? This is I found this website. This, and I've looked at this website before. This is the BuddhismToronto.com website. They have a lot of really great information on their website, and this is just an excerpt. They have a long page on Kshitigarbha, and I just thought it was really good. I mean, I thought it doesn't have any footnotes or anything, but you could tell it's very well researched, very knowledgeable, and has a lot of stuff in it. Let's see. According one story that I don't think I've heard, according to record, Jijang was bit by, and at one point, even though this is a Chinese website, they are talking about how Kshitigarbha came to China from Korea. And so they kind of switch over and are actually now, and you will rarely, if ever, see this on any website that is not from Korean Buddhists, referring to Dizang as Jijang. But according to records, Jijang was bitten by a poisonous snake, but he did not move, letting the snake go. A woman happened to pass by and gave the monk medicine to cure him of the venom, as well as a spring on her son's behalf. For a few years, Jijang continued to meditate in his hut until one day a scholar named Chu Kei led a group of friends and family to visit the mountain. Noticing the monk meditating in the hut, they went and took a look at his condition. They noticed that his bowl did not contain any food and that his hair had grown back. Anyway, I have not heard this story before, but I think I need to move on to just a couple more slides. But I would encourage you to go and look at this. This is just a really good, I think, one one page, a long page, but one page summary. And another thing that I really liked about it is that it ends with Kshitigarbha's true words or mantra for eradicating offenses. This is the mantra that we chant as part of Jijang Bosal chanting, but this is the Mandarin pronunciation: Ongbo Lamo Lin Tuo Ning Suo Po He, or as we say in our Sino-Korean pronunciation, Om Badamani Dani Sabaha. But it's the same. It's the same Chinese characters. It's the same mantra. This is the Kshitigarbha's or Jijang Bosal's mantra for eradicating offenses or eradicating difficult to eradicate karma. Okay. Oh yeah. So one thing that Juru does in the chapter is actually two subsections of the chapter are on Dizong's connections with Avalokiteshvara and also to some extent with Amitabha, and then also with Medicine Buddha. And so one thing I did was just go through the Kshitigarbha Sutra and look at all the different connections that are in that sutra. First of all, Kshitigarbha is connected to it's kind of a family connection to the Buddha, because the Kshitigarbha Sutra has this very, very, very special place where it's taught. It's taught in Triastrimsa's heaven, because that is where the Buddha's mother was. Actually, the Buddha's mother went up to Tushita heaven, but then she came down to Triastrimsa heaven whenever she was going to meet with Shakyamuni. Just to get into the gory details. But so the Kshitigarbha Sutra was taught by the Buddha to his mother. And so there's obviously some connection between Mayadevi, a very important figure in Buddhism, and Kshitigarbha. Manjushri is, and this is usually the case in Mahayana Sutras. He's a very important character. He's the one who asks the Buddha to teach about Kshitigarbha. There are lots of important hell beings, including more that I'll get to in just a minute, but Kshitigarbha is on a first name basis with these people, because at one point he's asked, what are the different hells and what are the people who run them? Maitreya is kind of prominent in the Kshitigarbha Sutra. Kshitigarbha at one point declares in chapter 4, "Now I have further been entrusted by the Buddha to guide all beings in the 6 realms of existence until Ajita becomes a Buddha." Ajita is another name for Maitreya. Samantabhadra is in chapter 8. Samantabhadra asks Kshitigarbha about the names of the different hells and the bad things that happen to people in those hells. And then chapter 5, chapter 8 has King Yama, who's extremely important, and one of the central connections that Kshitigarbha has is with King Yama. And King Yama also has some very close connections with Medicine Buddha. And then there's also all these ghost kings who are important underworld big shots. There's 19 different Buddhas that are named specifically in a chapter that is devoted specifically to the benefits of reciting the names of Buddhas. Prithvi, the earth goddess, the Vedic earth goddess. I need to correct that there. Avalokiteshvara has a whole chapter devoted to her, and it's by far the longest chapter. And Akashagarbha is prominently featured in the closing chapter of the Kshitigarbha Sutra. So Medicine Buddha is not mentioned in the Kshitigarbha Sutra. I don't think Amitabha or Amitabha's Western Pure Land is ever mentioned explicitly or even really implicitly in the Kshitigarbha Sutra. And those are also very important connections that Kshitigarbha has. So Kshitigarbha really has a lot of connections. Oh, that's it. I thought I had another slide. Okay, so we are almost out of time. So we'll finish up this chapter in January, and then we will at the end of January, and then so that we'll have 4 more meetings the Jijang Bosal book club. We'll meet twice in January and twice in February. We will finish up our discussion of Zhiru Ing's books, and then hopefully we will reconvene the book club sometime later in 2024. But I've got to prepare some other classes and do some stuff. But are there any questions before we close with the usual signing of the four vows? Yeah, Joe.
Any significance with the white robes? Because you're talking about monastic images, then went into the white robes. Any connection there?
Yeah. So the white robe Kuan Yin is the I think not 100% of the time, but is usually a female form of Kuan Yin. And as far as I know, I've never seen any reference to a bodhisattva being represented as a nun. Okay, I've tried to use the word monastic, but usually it is a monk. Well, yeah, and there's so there's only two bodhisattvas for whom there is really consistent evidence of their being represented as a monastic, and one of them eventually turned into a woman, Avalokiteshvara, and one of them is consistently portrayed in past lives as a woman, and that's Kshitigarbha. Kshitigarbha did two of the most important past lives of Kshitigarbha were times when she was a woman. And so, there is one other important bodhisattva who's often portrayed as a woman, and that is Mahastama Prapta. I think that's how it's pronounced, which is one of the main bodhisattvas associated with Amitabha. But yeah, so the white, I don't know what the significance of the white robe is, and often people make these beautiful Kuan Yin figures out of some sort of enamel or something, and it's just white by default, unless it's painted.
Yeah, there's a name to that. It's a type of porcelain or something.
Yeah, porcelain.
That's a very specific type of clay. So, and they're beautiful. They're really beautiful.
Yeah. And so when those are made, I don't think that I don't know if that automatically means that is white robe Kuan Yin that is being portrayed or not. Oh, but so before closing, I do want to just one more time recommend this, kind of one-stop shopping for information on Kshitigarbha at the BuddhismToronto.com website, which there'll be a link to this in the slides when you get the slides, and also in the description when I get the recording for the class posted tomorrow on YouTube. And this is just what I've got about maybe half of the information from that webpage is on this slide. It's a really good all-in-one overall overview of Kshitigarbha, but it doesn't mention the weird thing. Now I can't even remember the name of the weird thing that Kshitigarbha rides on, the lion. Okay, we should probably stop at this point. Let's see if I can find. Oh, good. That's not what we want. I hope everybody is having a good holidays and has a great 2024. And I hope to see you possibly at the Medicine Buddha Sutra reading on Saturday. But we'll close now with the four great vows. Sentient beings are numberless. We vow to save them all. Delusions are endless. We vow to cut through them all. The teachings are infinite. We vow to learn them all. The Buddha way is inconceivable. We vow to attain it. May whatever excellent qualities we have gained from this practice be extended for the benefit of all beings. Hi, Joe. Bye, Elizabeth.
Bye. Thank you.